folks. After a botched recording of today's Google Hangouts, I just wanted to make a quick video so those of you who weren't able to join the Hangout get to hear the same information. I'm also posting my slides on Blackboard, which have a lot more detail, as well as links to places where you can get more information. So what's the point of the simulation? It is complex because the real world is complex, and when you're making strategic decisions, you're going to have to figure out how marketing decisions impact R&D and how R&D impacts finance and vice versa. So it's supposed to be a little confusing by design. I apologize for that, but I promise you'll get the hang of it. So far you've completed 2 practice rounds, or you'll finish your second practice round tonight. And so after that practice round, all the results get reset, and you'll have a little time to regroup and think about your strategy before the real rounds start. Once the real rounds start, there are 8 rounds. Each round represents 1 year in simulation time, and all the decisions you make in the first year will be built upon in the second year, etc. So there's no more resets after the second practice round. Okay? So what's your goal? What's the point of this simulation? So your goal is to create a profitable company, sustainably profitable, because there are things you could do that would make you profitable in 1 year, but it's not necessarily a sustainable practice. Like if you didn't invest in R&D, you might be more profitable because you're not spending that money on R&D, but you'll fall behind and have products that people are not unwilling to buy in the future. So you have to balance all those different needs and think about the fact that this is a long-term game that represents 8 years. And your performance is actually measured on the balanced scorecard. So we use a number of different metrics that cover finance, operations, customer perspective, and learning and development. There are too many metrics almost for you to focus on a single one, although you get more information on the balanced scorecard. If you go into the CapSim simulation, you can find exactly which metrics you're being measured upon. That being said, if you just think about this as increasing revenue, lowering cost, and thinking about this for the long term and not just for one period, I think you'll do well. Some of my pointers for teams who are most to be successful: you need to coordinate up front. So try to have a meeting, whether it's by Google Hangouts or telephone, because I know many of you are not in the same city, but try to coordinate and have at least one meeting. You have an initial strategy statement due October 5th. It's basically a 1 to 2 page memo just saying, this is the strategy we're planning on employing in the simulation, and this is how we're going to coordinate as a group. Teams that are successful tend to coordinate more. They also tend to assign members of their team roles. So each member could be a product manager. At the launch, you only have one product, so maybe it doesn't make sense to organize like that immediately. Each team could be a segment manager, so one person may look after low-tech customers and one person may look after high-tech customers. But the way I've seen teams most typically organized is by function. So you'll have one R&D manager, one production manager, one marketing manager, one finance manager, and since your team's of 5, you'll probably have one person who either collects intelligence on other teams or just serves as your general administrative manager for the entire team, and it's their job to make sure all the decisions are inputted by the deadline. That role might rotate also, or you might switch roles sometime during the simulation if it makes sense for your group. Let's see. Finally, teams that stick to a strategy tend to be most successful. So I've included in my slides a link to a CapSim explanation of 6 basic strategies that you can pursue in this game. And they tell you a little bit about each strategy. My big recommendation is not trying to pick the absolute best strategy because they're all good. Just pick one and stick with it and figure out how to implement it. So pick one you understand. We've started talking about, in the textbook, in this class, we started talking about the difference between differentiation and cost leadership. So you won't be surprised that a lot of the strategies are kind of based on either being a differentiated product or a cost leader, okay? And all the decisions you make in marketing, in R&D, will all be impacted by your strategy, right? If you're a Tesla, you're going to look pretty different than if you're a Honda, okay? So think about that in terms of your sales and promotion budget, in terms of how you invest in R&D, if you're creating high-tech products. What are your customers' needs and wants, okay? In today's Hangout, folks had a few questions about the finance function. Your finance person, one of their key responsibilities is essentially ensuring that you have enough money to cover all the decisions your other teammates are making. So even though I said one of the best ways to organize as a team is to have functional managers, so one person covers R&D, one person covers marketing, etc., you do need to coordinate, whether it's by email or however else, because the decisions each team member makes affect other members of the team. And your finance person either needs to borrow money or issue stock, which also helps bring in money, to make sure there's enough money in the coffers to cover all the decisions. Say your production manager is building a new product line. You have to be able to afford that, right? I'd also caution you that if you decide to launch a new product, because you might choose to launch a new product in the R&D function, make sure your production person is aware of that, because they need to build capacity. R&D comes up with ideas, you invent something, but you need the capacity to actually produce it as well. So those are my big kind of warning points. Like I said, there's more detail and links to the 6 basic strategies you can pursue in my slides. So take a minute, look through those. If you have questions still, please feel free to reach out to me. I am also available if your entire group would like to meet with me, whether virtually or in person, to talk about your strategy and how you want to approach this game. I'm happy to do that as well. Yes, you are competing against one another. That's another question I got. Just like in the real world, you would face competition against other teams. But remember, from a grading perspective, back away from the simulation for a minute. You have the initial strategy statement. You have a final board report. At the end of this, you're making a video as a group talking about what you learned. You have peer evaluations, so if you have team members who aren't pulling their weight, that's where you can tell me. Of course, that's at the very end of the semester, so if you want to give me an update beforehand because you need professor intervention, feel free. So all those things have really nothing to do with your performance in the simulation, and there's just one piece, which is your balanced scorecard performance, that actually has to do with your performance in the simulation. So I want to make sure you're learning something. You may not be the stellar performers of the class necessarily, and that's okay. Not everyone can be number one. I just want to make sure you're learning something and trying to apply a strategy. So, like I said, take a minute, look over the slides. If you still have questions, feel free to reach out. Thanks. Bye.